Hey, this is again Dumcius with MassLive.com. I'm here with Adam Fine. He's an attorney who helped co-write the new marijuana law that's going into effect on Thursday, actually.
Thursday.
Big shift for Massachusetts. Massachusetts was one of the states that approved marijuana for recreational use in November. Tell me, what can people expect to happen when they wake up Thursday morning?
Sure. So Thursday morning, we're pleased that hard work from the folks from MPP and a lot of advocates and people that work really hard over a period of 2.5 years to get the law to go into effect. And we're gonna have the first kind of part of that on Thursday, which is the really the decrim aspect of it, or the legalization aspect of it. So what that will mean is people will be able to possess marijuana in limited amounts. They'll be able to grow marijuana in limited amounts. They will be able to buy any accessories to marijuana use lawfully, and that's pretty much it. That's the extent of what they'll be able to do. One additional thing is that they'll be able to share marijuana in limited amounts with other people without being guilty of a crime. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what will happen on Thursday. So to answer your question, what's going to happen is I think most people won't notice a difference. They'll just be a little bit more have more freedom, and won't be facing criminal sanctions for, frankly, conduct that's safer than consuming alcohol.
So are there going to be still places where you're not allowed to smoke? What?
Absolutely. I think it's important to note under question 4 and under the new law that will go into effect on Thursday, the use of marijuana in public is illegal, and it still will be illegal. Now, it won't be a criminal sanction if you use marijuana in public, or you'll be subject to a fine. So really, where the legalization comes into effect is using marijuana in private places, or possessing marijuana in private places. You can possess marijuana in an automobile. You want to be careful there that it's locked. If it's an open container of any kind, and that means if the marijuana package is open and it looks like it's used in any way, then it needs to be in your trunk or needs to be locked glove compartment. And that's a safer place to store the marijuana anyway, so you will be able to transport marijuana, but in terms of use, you're still not going to be able to use marijuana in public.
Okay. And is there a risk of getting arrested on the street if you're buying marijuana?
So there's always a risk that you shouldn't. It is lawful to possess marijuana. So what that means is, whereas under decrim, I think you would certainly be detained. If you were, let's say, you were going to buy your marijuana and there was a surveillance going on, and the person selling the marijuana is typically who's going to be the target of the criminal investigation. It's not typically the buyer, although that it has been before decrim. That certainly was the case. But in that scenario, usually what would happen was the seller would get arrested and the buyer would be detained, and depending on the quantity of marijuana purchased, it would depend on what the law enforcement would do. And they would get a fine. In this case, that should not happen. You should not be subject to arrest for buying marijuana as long as you're within the quantity limits under the law. And so you can buy marijuana. There's always a risk when you go into the criminal, illicit marketplace that you're going to be subject to law enforcement investigations. And I say there's always a risk because there's going to be kind of an education gap in law enforcement. We saw it after decrim. We saw after medical passed in 2012. That people were still getting arrested even though their cases were ultimately dismissed. But you could still theoretically get arrested, if law enforcement aren't up to speed with the new law.
So we're getting a couple of reader questions here. Thanks for weighing in, folks. The question from one person is, how much is the maximum amount of marijuana I can keep in my house if I'm growing it? Is it 10 ounces, or is that amount lifted due to me growing it myself?
So this area, I think the thing to think about with growing, so it's 10 ounces in your home, okay? So, I think the thing to remember with respect to growing, or it's 6 plants, a maximum of 12 in a household. So that's kind of those are the numbers that we're talking about. Now, anytime you start to, there's going to be a question of, how much marijuana is on the plant. But if it's contained to the plant, and even if it's more than 10 ounces, you're okay as long as it's on the plant. That's the intent of the law. Now, this is going to be subject to interpretation, but you're talking about, those are the numbers. So, we just want to be careful when we talk about, when we start to talk about the more quantities you have, the more subject you're going to be, the more risks you're going to face in terms of kind of the impact of the law on, whether or not you could be subject to police intervention. But I think if you're within those numbers, you're absolutely safe under the law. Now, if you have more quantities, off the plant, but it's still part of the plant, I mean, that's where we're going to see kind of a murky area. And I think to be safe, once you have the 6 plants, just make sure the quantities, if they're over that amount, stay on the plant.
And if you've possessed marijuana before December 15th and you have, let's say, up to 10 ounces inside your home, does that become legal on December 15th? So previously obtained marijuana?
Yes.
That does become legal?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So for a number of folks, and us reporters have also asked this question amongst ourselves, it's almost a chicken and egg scenario. How do you obtain seeds or marijuana? I know people can gift up to an ounce. Is that going to be a primary vehicle for marijuana obtaining?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is I think you can't lawfully purchase seeds from anybody, right? So absolutely, I think the way to do it lawfully, and it's also worth pointing out that everything we're talking about is illegal under federal law. So
Correct.
There's always that risk under federal law. So let me just get that out of the way. But I think that will be the prime. If you want to do it lawfully in terms of whether or not you're the giver or the receiver, it should be without remuneration. There's no compensation, and you're okay in terms of obtaining the seeds. Now, there are people that get seeds over the internet. That would be illegal under federal law, and I just wouldn't recommend it. It's always illegal under federal law, but you're also heightening your risk under state law. So that would be the lawful way to obtain seeds from a lawful provider. And in this case, the only lawful provider would be somebody that is giving it away and not selling it for profit or selling it at all for any compensation.
And gifting, when the law says you can gift up to an ounce of marijuana, that does also include seeds, right? That can be interpreted as meaning seeds?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And marijuana products like brownies or something like that, does that also fall within the...
Yeah, so then we're getting into the concentration limits. And just offhand, I'm just trying to... concentration limits I'm actually not remembering offhand, but I can get back to you on it. But I can't remember the exact concentration limits, but yes, that would be part of it. So that's going to fall under the concentrate limit, and how they weigh that out, that's kind of going to be to determine. But as long as you have, certainly in terms of flour, you're talking about 10 ounces of flour, and then I can get back to you. Sorry, I just don't remember the concentration limits offhand.
So on December 15th, parts of the law will be going into effect, but it's not like we're going to have retail shops popping up in the next couple of weeks. Kind of walk us through that. How long before someone can legally buy weed in Massachusetts?
So we have to go through. We have the law in place. We're going to have the home grow provisions. We'll have the lawful possession limits. And so now the real goal is to get retail shops open. So we have it. So we can eliminate the illicit marketplace and give people a safe environment to purchase marijuana. And we've put in the law a relatively aggressive but doable time frame to get this done. So the first applications, we're gonna hopefully have application starting the rulemaking regulatory process that should take a year. It has to be done within a year. Otherwise, you'll be able to purchase marijuana from a medical marijuana dispensary. But before then, October 2017 is when we anticipate the first applications being accepted. And then within a few months after that was when we hope that retail stores would open. So we're looking at around the end of next year, so the end of 2017, when the law is intended, and we hope, if the regulators are doing their job, that you'll be able to see the first retail establishments. And
medical marijuana shops will have a first crack at some of these licenses, correct?
It is. That was the intent, and so whether or not I presume that many will partake, and they will, and they're supposed to be starting to accept applications no later than October of 2017. Those would be called for what's called experienced operators. Could happen earlier than that, and that's what we're pushing for. But I think the expectation should be that it will be the experienced operators, i.e. the current medical marijuana operators, in the application process that will be able to first apply and then get to get their license. And that transition should be relatively smooth because the product really doesn't differ, other than the recreational market will probably have some higher, the CBD products may not be as popular on the recreational side.
And now some of this comes with a caveat because Beacon Hill legislators have talked about making changes. They've said that it's obviously a lot of them didn't like the law that passed to begin with. They campaigned against it with some exceptions, and they're looking to make some changes. They might try to increase the tax rate from 12 to 13% to something in the 20s. They might try to raise the age even. I think there was some talk of that today. What's your take about what can we expect in the year ahead, and how pitched is this battle going to get on Beacon Hill?
So I'm caught. We've spent a lot of work and working with the campaign and others, other stakeholders, and I'm having the lawmakers that I've spoken with, and that's I believe most of the people that are going to be involved with potentially making changes. I'm cautiously optimistic overall. I think that what we've heard publicly from DeLeo and from Rosenberg and from the Treasurer's office and even the governors, that they're going to respect the will of voters here. That's really encouraging. But absolutely, there has been talk. I think that the things that come to the fore are taxes. So there'll be a discussion about taxes. The timeline, there is talk about moving the timeline back. I think that's not a desirable thing because we're continuing to have people buy their marijuana from the illicit market, which I think is a mistake. Which we want to get these retail operations up and running as quickly as possible. And so that's where I think if we're going to see changes, I think it's going to be, we're going to have a discussion or a battle. It'll be on those issues. How contentious it will be, I'm hopeful that it won't be. I think the indications are that from the public officials that they want to discuss, and they have had meetings, and I've been present at those meetings with stakeholders, and that they want to kind of work together. In terms of the age limit, I hope I don't think that will happen. I think 21 is the appropriate age. We do know in Canada they're actually making a recommendation for 18 years old. I think that's too young, and I don't see the age. I don't see that our lawmakers going down on the age. I think we're going to keep it at 21. So that's where I think, and I'm hopeful that it won't be that that we can get this. There's an issue of appropriation. By ballot initiatives, you can't appropriate funds. You just can't do it. So we need this to get funded so we can have the Treasurer's office do their work, and the bulk of that work is going to come from getting the regulations promulgated so we can have a robust kind of dynamic regulatory environment and allow for storefronts.
So we have a couple of minutes left. I did want to get into the workplace because we've got a few questions about that. How is marijuana legalization going to affect the workplace? Won't businesses that do drug tests still be able to fire employees if they test positive for marijuana?
Yep, absolutely. So there are no protections in our law for employees, and employers asked for this, and we felt it was important not to impact employers' rights and under the law as it stands now. So anything that employers can do now with regard to drug testing, they'll be able to do on Thursday and beyond.
And in terms of campus dorm rooms, how is that going to work in campuses?
Sure. So campuses are able to set their own rules, in colleges and can set their own rules around alcohol, around many things. So they'll be able to set their own rules around cannabis. And this is particularly what we've seen in other states due to the illegality of marijuana under federal laws. Many campuses will just not allow cannabis. You still will not be able to use it on campus. But that doesn't change the fact that if you do use it on campus, you're not going to be subject to criminal penalties under Massachusetts law. You may be subject to sanctions from your school, but you're not going to be subject to criminal penalties. So it'll still be illegal under federal law, but you'll still be legal under state law. But you do need to be aware that many campuses will have no cannabis policies, and that's my expectation.
Okay. And I wanted to end on what could happen under the Trump administration. I've read takes on both ends where people say they don't expect the administration to touch it because they have so many other focuses starting out, and others have said, well, the Attorney General nominee, Jeff Sessions, very much anti-marijuana. He could do a lot of damage, especially in a place like Colorado, which has had marijuana legalized for a couple of years now. What's your take on what's going to happen at the federal level over the next few years?
Sure. So this is a difficult question to answer, and a lot that we've been spending a lot of time on, and there's a lot of speculation around. But I think here's my take, and this is just my take. So I'll speak for myself and not for any industry or even my law firm. But we've seen a big progression in terms of people's views on marijuana and the acceptance of marijuana throughout the country. If we look at, we now have 4 states in November that legalized marijuana. We're at 9 states. I think 29 states, the last count, that have some sort of medical marijuana or recreational marijuana programs. And the popularity, particularly of medical marijuana, recreational marijuana nationally, according to the last Pew poll, is 60% recreational recreational, 60% medical. If you look at Florida, that came in at 70%, and that's Florida. So we're looking at legalization is popular, especially medical. So what I think particularly around medical, I think medical is relatively safe environment. I think that our medical program under Sessions is going to remain untouched. Likewise, in other states that have fully regulated systems, such as we do in Massachusetts, medical marijuana, I do not think is going to be a top priority for the Sessions administration. That being said, it is still legal under federal law, and they could take what's called the Cole Memorandum, which is the current guidance memo, and tear it up. If they tear it up with respect to medical, we still have the Rohr-Farbacher spending budget amendment, which was just recently continued via continuing resolution in Congress, and that will give kind of medical marijuana. And for the viewers that don't know, that's basically says that the U.S. government cannot spend any money or not allocate any money to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice cannot spend any money to interfere with state medical marijuana programs. That's been taken up in the Ninth Circuit to basically bar even criminal prosecutions around medical marijuana. So that's a very important federal law, spending law, that protects the medical marijuana marketplace. And I think that will kind of carry over at least until April. And even if it doesn't get renewed, I still think because of the political and just the public's popular acceptance of marijuana and approval of it, medical marijuana, that's a safe. Medical marijuana is relatively safe. The big question mark in my mind lies with recreational marijuana. And I think the enforcement, and I'm giving you a long answer, but it's important. Sure. So enforcement around, this could come in a variety of ways. But one thing that could happen is they could try and tell states not to implement the law. Now, if they tell that, and that could be the most likelihood, which is hold off, we're evaluating, don't implement. Now the states can choose to follow or not follow. All the lawmakers were said that they are going to follow state law. They're going to follow the will of the voters and implement. They could file a lawsuit to try and basically overturn our law on preemption grounds. But most legal scholars, and I'm not a legal scholar, but as a lawyer, I agree with most legal scholars that even if the federal government was successful in a preemption lawsuit, what we'll have on Thursday will still remain in effect. So they're not going to be able to, they may be able to stop these regulated businesses from opening at a state level, but they won't be able to, unless they want to put an extraordinary amount of federal resources towards arresting users, which we've really rarely see under federal law, using marijuana in small amounts from an enforcement standpoint, just they won't be able to stop. So I think that there is a question mark, and we'll wait and see. We're going to have appointment hearings in Congress. I believe it's been set now for January 10th, I think 3 days. So that's going to be you can be sure there'll be a lot of eyes in the marijuana industry, watching those hearings. But I think overall, even by saying there's a question mark, I still think that we're going to see progress. How much progress on the recreational side? I'm not sure yet.
Okay. I'm auth-gdumcius with MassLive. He's Adam Fine, one of the attorneys who helped write the new law that is going into effect December 15th, Thursday. It's going to mean Massachusetts has legalized marijuana. Stay tuned. Stay on MassLive for more information. Thanks.